90,000 years ago, a young girl walked the edge of a cold Siberian river, unaware that she was unlike any human alive today. She was the child of two different species, a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, a hybrid whose very existence rewrites everything we thought we knew about human evolution. She died young, leaving behind only a sliver of bone, barely 2 centimeters long. But from that tiny fragment, scientists have uncovered an entire forgotten species, the Denisovans. Who were they? Where did they live? And how do they still live on? Inside us. Chapter 1. The discovery that changed everything in 2008. Inside the frozen silence of Siberia's Denisova cave, a team of Russian archaeologists stumbled upon what seemed like an unremarkable fragment of bone. A small, weathered piece of a finger, no larger than a coin. But hidden within that 2-centimeter sliver was a secret waiting 90,000 years to be told. When researchers at the Max Planck Institute sequenced its DNA, they made a stunning discovery. This bone did not belong to a modern human, nor to a Neanderthal. It came from an entirely new species of archaic human, previously unknown to science. This species would later be named the Denisovans, after the very cave that sheltered their remains. From the outset, Denisovans presented a mystery. They left behind almost no fossils, just a finger bone, a few massive molars, and later a fragment of a limb and a partial jawbone found high in the Tibetan Plateau. And yet, from this limited material, scientists extracted complete genomes, uncovering the story of a people who once lived across vast stretches of Asia, interbred with other human species, and left their genetic fingerprints in millions of people alive today. The breakthrough came not only from the power of ancient DNA extraction, but from the environment of the Denisova cave itself. Cold, stable, and dry, perfect conditions to preserve genetic material for tens of thousands of years. And what that DNA told us was astonishing. Not only did Denisovans exist, they thrived, and more importantly, they mingled. One individual, known simply as Denny, changed everything. Her genome revealed something never before seen. She was the direct offspring of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, a literal hybrid born of two distinct species of ancient humans. This wasn't a rare accident. DNA evidence shows that Denisovans and Neanderthals interbred multiple times over thousands of years. In fact, nearly 17% of the Denisovan genome appears to be inherited from Neanderthals, pointing to repeated and successful mixing between species. The Denisova cave, as it turns out, wasn't just a place of survival. It was a prehistoric meeting point, a shared space for two human species navigating an unforgiving Ice Age world. What made this even more mind-blowing was how close Denisovans were to us. When compared genetically, Denisovans are more different, and from modern humans than Neanderthals are, yet they were still close enough to produce fertile offspring with both species. That means modern humans, Denisovans, and Neanderthals weren't branches on separate trees. They were twigs on the same tangled vine, growing together, crossing over, and shaping one another. And while their bones may be rare, their legacy is not. Denisovan DNA is still present in modern populations, especially in people from Papua New Guinea, Aboriginal Australians, and some Southeast Asian island groups, where 4 to 6% of their genome can be traced back to these long-lost ancestors. Their genes influence things as specific as fat metabolism and as vital as high-altitude survival. Like in Tibetans, whose ability to thrive in low-oxygen environments is linked directly to Denisovan DNA. But what did Denisovans actually look like? With so few fossils, we can't say for sure, but based on genetic methylation patterns and comparisons with Neanderthals, scientists believe they likely had long, wide faces, robust jaws, and large teeth, perhaps even more archaic in some features than their Neanderthal cousins. Their molars were massive, more similar to ancient hominins like Homo habilis or erectus than to modern humans, suggesting a tough, unprocessed diet. And their limb bones, thick and heavy, point to a physically powerful people, well adapted to harsh environments. Yet Denisovans weren't simple brutes. They used tools, they made ornaments, and they passed down knowledge through generations. Artifacts from Denisova Cave include sophisticated stone tools and possibly jewelry made from animal teeth and ivory, indicating cognitive abilities not far off from early Homo sapiens. But perhaps most intriguing is how widespread they were. For years, the only known fossils came from Siberia, a cold mountainous region far from human migration paths. Then, in 2019, a fossilized jawbone found in Baishia Karst Cave on the Tibetan Plateau was confirmed to be Denisovan. This jaw was dated to 160,000 years ago, placing Denisovans at extreme altitudes tens of thousands of years before modern humans arrived. This suggested that they weren't just cold adapted, they were high-altitude survivors with physiology that could endure thin air and freezing winds. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Genetic evidence suggests Denisovans were not a single uniform population. In fact, they may have split into multiple distinct groups across Asia. One population spread through Siberia and into parts of Central Asia. Another moved southeast, interbreeding with ancestors of Papuans and Aboriginal Australians. And yet another lived in mainland Southeast Asia. These groups were genetically different enough that some scientists now argue they could represent separate species, distant cousins under the Denisovan name. What we call Denisovans might actually be a cluster of ancient human species, united by fragments of DNA but separated by geography, climate, and time. Their disappearance remains a mystery. Did they go extinct due to changing climate, competition with Homo sapiens, or were they simply absorbed into other populations through interbreeding? Likely, it was all of the above. But one thing is certain, Denisovans are not entirely gone. They live on in us, in our genes, in our physiology, in the biological stories we carry without even knowing it. The discovery of Denisovans reminds us how incomplete our understanding of human history truly is. A single finger bone, barely 2 centimeters long, opened the door to a lost chapter of humanity. How many more stories are buried, still waiting to be found? Denisovans challenge the idea of a simple evolutionary ladder. Instead, they paint a picture of ancient humanity as a braided stream, multiple lineages flowing together, splitting apart, and occasionally merging again. And in that messy, beautiful web of ancestry, Denisovans hold a central forgotten place. What else might we find in the caves of Siberia, the mountains of Tibet, or the islands of Oceania? Their story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. Chapter 2. Who were the Denisovans? The Denisovans remain one of the most mysterious branches of the human family tree, not because they left no legacy, but because their legacy was written in fragments. Fragments of bone, fragments of tooth, fragments of time. While the first physical remains were discovered only recently, in 2008, genetic analysis has pushed their story far deeper into the past. According to current estimates, Denisovans diverged from a common ancestor shared with Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago, with both species splitting from the Homo sapiens lineage roughly 600,000 years ago. This would mean that Denisovans evolved and adapted across a vast geographic range, separate from Neanderthals in the West and modern humans in Africa. What's remarkable is that despite sharing this ancient origin with Neanderthals, Denisovans seem to have followed a very different evolutionary path, shaped by the diverse landscapes of Asia. Fossils and genetic evidence suggest they were widespread, from the frigid taigas of Siberia to the high altitudes of the Tibetan Plateau, and as far south as the islands of Southeast Asia. Such a wide range hints not only at adaptability, but at the possibility of multiple distinct Denisovan populations, each shaped by its environment, each evolving in slightly different ways. Their presence in such extremes of climate, especially in the Tibetan Plateau, where oxygen levels are dangerously low, is astonishing. A jawbone found in Baishia Karst Cave, 3,200 meters above sea level, dates to 160,000 years ago, and belongs to a Denisovan, confirmed via ancient protein analysis. How could they survive such conditions? The answer lies in their DNA. Genetic studies show that Denisovans carried variants of the EPAS1 gene, which regulates the body's response to hypoxia, or low oxygen levels, a gene still found in Tibetans today. This adaptation predates the arrival of Homo sapiens in the region and indicates that Denisovans had already conquered environments that would challenge even modern climbers. Physically, what they looked like is still largely a mystery, as we have no complete skull or skeleton, but through genetic methylation analysis, studying the chemical modifications that affect how genes are expressed, scientists have reconstructed likely facial features. Denisovans are thought to have had broad skulls, large jaws, and wide dental arches. Their molars were massive, larger than any found in Homo sapiens or Neanderthals, and displayed primitive traits more commonly seen in much earlier human species, like Homo erectus or even Australopithecines. One molar, for example, was so large and morphologically unique that if it had been found alone, it might have been assigned to a completely different genus. These features suggest that while Denisovans were genetically close to Neanderthals and modern humans, they retained more archaic traits, perhaps due to isolated evolution or interbreeding with even older hominin species. In fact, around 4% of the Denisovan genome appears to come from an unknown archaic human, a ghost lineage that may represent a species we've never discovered, or possibly Homo erectus. This means Denisovans weren't just a bridge between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. They were a complex node in a tangled web of ancient interbreeding, carrying echoes of species long vanished from the fossil record. Yet Denisovans were more than their bones and genes. Artifacts found in Denisova cave suggest they were capable toolmakers and may have had symbolic culture. Among the items discovered are a polished green chlorite bracelet with a drilled hole, possibly worn as ornament, and an exquisitely carved bone needle with an eyelet, thought to be the oldest of its kind. These objects hint at cognitive abilities that rival those of early Homo sapiens, suggesting that Denisovans may have had language, art, and perhaps even spiritual beliefs. But attributing these tools definitively to Denisovans is challenging, because by around 45,000 years ago, modern humans had begun moving into the same regions, and some artifacts may belong to them instead. Still, given the age of certain layers and the absence of modern human DNA in those strata, it is likely that at least some of these tools and ornaments were the work of Denisovans themselves. What's even more intriguing is how Denisovans were not a uniform population. Genetic studies reveal at least 3 distinct Denisovan lineages, each diverging from a common ancestor over 250,000 years ago. One group occupied Siberia and Central Asia, the individuals whose remains were found in Denisova cave. Another group seems to have lived in Southeast Asia, with their genetic signature most prevalent in populations of Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australians. A third, now dubbed the Ghost Denisovans, left DNA traces in East Asians, yet no fossil evidence of them has yet been found. These genetic signatures differ so significantly that one group was as genetically distinct from Siberian Denisovans as Neanderthals were. This has led some researchers to argue that these might not just be subpopulations, but entirely separate species we can't name, because their fossils remain undiscovered and their story lies buried in remote caves and unexplored jungles. And yet, they left clues inside us. For example, Denisovan genetic contributions influence how modern populations regulate body fat, a likely advantage in colder climates. In other cases, Denisovan genes affect immune response, particularly against viruses, offering ancient immunity passed down to their hybrid descendants. This shows that Denisovans were not evolutionary dead ends. They contributed useful adaptations that helped early modern humans survive in unfamiliar environments. Their long-term presence in Asia, likely spanning hundreds of thousands of years, suggests they were a successful species, occupying a range of environments from frozen mountains to humid tropics. Yet for all their resilience, Denisovans eventually disappeared as a distinct population. Perhaps they were absorbed into Homo sapiens through continuous interbreeding. Perhaps changing climate, shrinking habitats, or competition led to their decline. Or perhaps, like the stories of so many ancient peoples, they vanished slowly, generation by generation, until only their memory remained in the DNA of others. Still, even without a single complete skull, Denisovans have become one of the most important discoveries in the study of human origins. They force us to rethink the idea of linear human evolution. Instead of one species replacing another, we now see a world where multiple species of humans lived at the same time, interacting, competing, and combining in ways that shape the genetic mosaic of humanity today. And Denisovans were not footnotes, they were main characters in that story. The fact that their existence was completely unknown until just over a decade ago is both humbling and exhilarating. It means that the Earth still holds secrets, ancient human secrets, waiting to be found in layers of rock, in fragments of teeth, and in the bloodlines of people walking among us. The Denisovans are not simply relics of the past, they are reminders of how much we still don't know and how every new discovery could reveal another hidden chapter in the story of us. Chapter 3. The Denisovans Within Us. Though their bones have long turned to dust and their faces remain unknown, the Denisovans are not truly gone. They live on within us, silently woven into the genetic fabric of modern humanity. Through the remarkable science of ancient DNA, we now know that these mysterious humans did not simply vanish into extinction, but interbred with Homo sapiens in multiple parts of the world, leaving behind traces of their existence in our very blood. In fact, some modern populations today carry more Denisovan DNA than others carry Neanderthal DNA. Nowhere is this legacy more profound than in Oceania, especially among Papuan, Aboriginal Australian, and Melanesian populations, where between 4 to 6% of the genome derives from Denisovan ancestry. This genetic signature is not just a remnant, it is functional, active, and in some cases, essential. For instance, Tibetans owe their extraordinary ability to survive at high altitudes where oxygen levels are dangerously low to a Denisovan-derived version of the EPAS1 gene, a variant that helps regulate red blood cell production and oxygen transport. This gene likely originated in the high-altitude Denisovan populations of the Tibetan Plateau and was passed to modern humans through interbreeding. Without it, life above 3,000 meters might be impossible for most people. But this is only one example. Denisovan genes have been linked to adaptations in fat metabolism, particularly useful in cold climates, immune system enhancements, and even skin and hair traits, though their exact impact varies between populations. Recent studies have shown that Denisovan alleles are still expressed in genes related to bone development, wound healing, and response to pathogens, giving us insight into how these ancient humans may have shaped our own species' success in challenging environments. What's fascinating is that Denisovan ancestry is not evenly distributed. While populations in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and New Guinea show clear Denisovan influence, East Asians, like the Han Chinese and Japanese, carry only trace amounts, around 0.2 to 0.5%. Even more curious, South Asian groups like Indians and Sri Lankans carry Denisovan ancestry, but only from one lineage, while Papuans and some Southeast Asian islanders have contributions from 2 or more distinct Denisovan groups. This suggests multiple independent interbreeding events over tens of thousands of years, with each wave of modern humans encountering different Denisovan populations spread across Asia. The Denisova cave population in Siberia was genetically distinct from those that influenced Southeast Asia, and some scientists argue that Denisovans were not a single people, but a collection of divergent subgroups, possibly even separate species. One Denisovan genetic signal found in Philippine Negrito populations is so distinct that researchers believe it may have come from a third, completely separate Denisovan lineage, one whose bones have yet to be found. In essence, the Denisovans weren't just one ancient group, they were many, scattered across climates and continents, adapting uniquely and leaving different genetic footprints in each place they touched. This complex web of genetic exchange reshapes the way we understand human evolution. No longer is our species past a linear march from primitive to advanced. Instead, it's a braided stream, interconnected, messy, full of crossings and recombinations. The Denisovans challenged the simplistic notion of survival of the fittest. They were not conquered by Homo sapiens in the traditional sense. Rather, they became part of us. Their DNA entered ours not through violence alone, but through connection, through families formed, children born, lineages blended. The fact that some Denisovan interbreeding may have occurred as recently as 15,000 years ago long after they were thought extinct, raises even more questions. Did isolated Denisovan groups survive in remote regions far longer than we believed? Were the last of their kind absorbed by incoming Homo sapiens, their cultures forgotten but their biology retained? If so, their extinction was not a vanishing, but a merging. Some scientists now argue that extinction may be the wrong word entirely when talking about Denisovans. After all, if their genes continue to shape modern humans, if their adaptations help people breathe, survive disease, and thrive in difficult conditions, then are they truly extinct? Or are they simply another voice in the chorus of our ancestry, quieter perhaps, but no less vital? The legacy of the Denisovans also carries important implications for medicine and science. By understanding the genes they passed on, we gain insight into human biology, how we adapt to our environments, how we resist illness, and how ancient genetics can still influence modern health. And there may be more surprises waiting. Our understanding of Denisovan DNA is still evolving. As genome sequencing becomes more advanced, and as scientists analyze more ancient samples, it's likely we will uncover even more Denisovan-derived traits, possibly affecting cognitive function, behavior, or disease resistance. What began with a single pinky bone in a Siberian cave has become a vast and unfolding genetic story. And perhaps the most poetic part is this. Many people alive today unknowingly carry the spark of Denisovan life inside them. They may never know the names of their ancient ancestors, may never visit the caves they once slept in, may never touch the tools or jewelry they crafted, but their breath, their blood, their strength, even their ability to climb mountains, is shared with people who walked the earth tens of thousands of years ago, under the stars, around ancient fires, speaking languages now lost. The Denisovans remind us that the human story is bigger than any one species. It is a mosaic built from fragments of forgotten people whose legacies endure not in monuments or empires, but in the cells of those who came after. We carry them with us silently, invisibly, but undeniably. They are not relics, they are relatives, and their story is far from over. A forgotten people, a living legacy. In the vast, complex story of human evolution, the Denisovans are a quiet but powerful chapter, one that we almost missed entirely. From a single finger bone discovered in a Siberian cave, we uncovered a whole species, a people who lived, loved, and endured across tens of thousands of years, only to disappear without leaving behind a written word or even a complete skeleton. Yet they left something far more lasting, their DNA. We carry their genes in our lungs, our blood, our bones. They gave us the tools to survive at high altitudes, to resist disease, to thrive in unfamiliar lands. And though their names were lost to time, though no one remembers their languages or their songs, Denisovans are still with us, woven into the very fabric of who we are. Their story reminds us that we are not alone in our humanity. For most of our existence, we shared this planet with other kinds of humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps others still waiting to be discovered. We lived alongside them, learned from them, and sometimes became one with them. Evolution, as it turns out, was not a race. It was a conversation, a shared survival, a merging of paths. The Denisovans vanished from history, but their presence lingers in the genes of millions, in the cold caves of the Altai Mountains, and in the questions we still ask about where we come from and who we really are. And perhaps the greatest truth their story teaches us is this: humanity has never been one thing. We are not defined by bloodlines or borders, but by connections, ancient, invisible, and deeply shared. The Denisovans are not just a lost species. They are part of our story, part of us.